We live today in a society where people define themselves by the total of influence they have on others. And without that, it can be very easy to feel insignificant from time to time. Today we're going to talk about overcoming feelings of insignificance. Have you ever felt like you just don't matter? Like you're just there and you're not the most talented person in the world. You're not the most noticeable person in the world. Not the one that people look to or look at overall. And maybe you wouldn't say it out loud, but deep down, there's that quiet thought of, what difference really does my life make? And if we're honest, that feeling can sneak up in a lot of different ways in life. You scroll through social media, you see what everybody else is doing, and you watch people succeed, you see them grow, you see the attention they get, and then suddenly you feel very, very small, feel insignificant. And here's the truth about most people that they really won't tell you. Feeling insignificant is one of the most common struggles today that people will face. Even for strong Christians, even for faithful people, even people that God uses greatly. So if you felt that way, I want to go ahead and begin by saying it this way. You're not alone in thinking that. But more importantly, you're not seeing yourself the way that God sees you. Let's start right here. Psalm 139 verse 14 says, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. That verse does not say some people are wonderfully made, but not you. That doesn't say the talented are wonderfully made. No, it says you are wonderfully made. But here's the disconnect. We hear that verse, we read it, but we don't always believe it. Let me give you a picture. Imagine somebody hands you a $100 bill. It's crisp, it's clean, it's perfect. You take it. As I would as well. I mean, hey, thank you so much for the $100. Now, imagine if you crumple it up and throw it on the ground, step on it, pick it back up, and different things. Let me ask you this. Would you still want it? Of course you would. Why? Because the value didn't change even though it's all crumpled up, and even though it's not the prettiest $100 bill, it's still $100 at the end of the day. You're going to take it. But life has a way of crumpling you, does it not? Stepping on you, making you feel lesser than. And if you're not careful, you're going to start believing that because of the issues and problems of life, you've lost your value. But you haven't. Let's go deeper. One of the biggest reasons that we feel insignificant is this. We measure ourselves by the wrong standard. We compare ourselves with somebody else's life, or our progress with how somebody else is progressing, or our calling of life to somebody else's calling. And comparison will drain the life out of you completely. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 12 says, but they measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves are not wise. God does not say, it's unhelpful to think that way. He says at point blank, it's not wise to think that way. Because comparison creates two very dangerous outcomes. Either you feel inferior than somebody else of, I'll never be like that. Or you'll feel superior. Hey, I'm doing better than what they're doing. And can I say both of them are very wrong ideas to have. Because neither one is rooted in truth. Let me kind of illustrate it for you this way. Imagine a fish looking at a bird and saying, I can't fly, so therefore I must be worthless. That sounds ridiculous. But we do the very same thing sometimes, do we not? We compare different callings. We compare different gifts. We compare different seasons of our lives, and then we wonder, why do we feel insignificant? God never asked you to be somebody else. He asked you to be faithful with who you are supposed to be personally by yourself. 1 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 18 says, but now hath God set the members every one of them in the body as it hath pleased him. Let that settle in for a moment and think about it. God placed you exactly where you are. It's not random. It's not by accident. It's as it was pleasing to Him. So if you're where you're supposed to be, it's because God chose it. Not that it's all by happenstance, not that it's random, but God has put you where you are. Now here's another reason that people feel insignificant today. They think that impact has to be a big matter. We think big platform will equal big purpose, or big crowd will mean big impact, or big recognition means real value. But God does not measure impact in that way at all. Zechariah chapter 4 verse number 10 says, "For who hath despised the day of small things?" God values small things today. Let me tell you a story. I heard a story of a Sunday school teacher who felt like, she was not really doing anything that mattered very much. Small class, just a couple of kids, nothing big seemed to be happening. One of those kids grew up, and he preached to thousands of people, and many of them got saved. And he said later in one of his sermons, "I started this journey as a boy with a Sunday school teacher who took the time to invest in me and share the Bible with me." Small does not mean insignificant. It means you're in a place where faithfulness matters. Let's slow down here for a moment because this is very important. Some of the most meaningful things you will ever do will not be seen by a whole lot of people. Encouraging somebody privately, staying faithful whenever nobody else notices, doing right when it is hard, and it's in these moments you might feel invisible. But you're not invisible to God. Hebrews chapter 6 verse 10 says, "For God is not unrighteous to forget your work and labor of love." God sees. He sees your effort. He sees your sacrifice. And He sees the acts of obedience that you do in His name. Nothing that you ever do for God is wasted. Let's deal with something else too. Sometimes insignificance doesn't come from comparison. Sometimes it may come from failures. You tried something and it didn't work. You stepped out and it didn't go the way that you thought. You made mistakes along the way, and it's led you to a place where the reasoning behind why I feel the way that I feel is because I have just made so many mistakes. So now you feel like, why and even how could God use me? But listen, Psalm 34 verse 18 says, "The Lord is nigh unto them that are of a broken heart." God does not move away from broken people. He moves closer to them. Failure does not disqualify you today. In fact, many times it's the part of how God shapes you is by our failures. Think about it. Moses, he failed. David, he failed greatly. Peter, he denied the Lord 3 times. And God still used all of them in spite of them. So why do we think that we are the exception to the rule? If God used Moses, David, and Peter, and so many other people that failed in the Bible, hey, why do we say of ourselves, there's no way God could use me? Let me give you another picture. A potter does not throw clay away because it's messy, or that it's messed up, or whatever. He reshapes it. And he molds it again and makes it into what it was supposed to be originally. It may not have been able to get there the first try, but the potter goes a second time and a third time and however many times to get it just right. That's what God does with your life today. It's not just one and done. Just because you messed up once, that means He's finished with you. No, He will pick you back up and He will brush you off and He will help you get to where you need to be. Now let's get very practical. How do you actually overcome feelings of insignificance? Because it's one thing to identify why we feel the way that we feel, but it's a whole other thing to try and overcome those feelings, because sometimes those feelings can be incredibly strong. First, you have to change what you believe about your own value. Genesis chapter 1 verse 27 says, "So God created man in His own image." You were made today in the image of God. That alone gives you value. Amazing value. Not your success, not your performance, not your recognition, but God's image. And secondly, you have to stop comparing. Every time that you compare, you step outside of what God has designed you for. Stay in your lane. Run your race. Don't run somebody else's. Don't get upset because somebody's in front of you. No, run the race that you are supposed to run. Third thing, focus on faithfulness and not fame. Matthew chapter 25, verse 21 says, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." Not popularity, but a faithful servant. Fourth thing, you remind yourself that God sees you, even when nobody else sees you. So let's bring this home. There's a story about a man walking along the beach after a storm, and thousands of starfish washed up. You've probably heard this before, and they were going to die if they were going to stay on the shore. And so he starts to pick them up one by one and throw them back into the ocean. And remember, there's thousands of these things, and he's just one by one throwing them back. There's a man that comes by, and he sees what this guy's doing. He says, "Hey, why are you doing this? You think you're really making a difference? You're not going to save that many of them." And the man picked up one more and threw it back into the ocean. And he says, "I made a difference for that one, didn't I?" That's how God works today. Your life may not impact millions of people, but it can impact somebody. And that matters. So if you've been feeling insignificant, let me remind you, you are seen today. You are valued. You are placed on purpose where you're at. Philippians 4:13 says, "I can do all things through Christ Jesus, which strengtheneth me," not because of who you are, but because of who is working in you. So don't believe the lie that you don't matter, because in God's plan, there are no insignificant people. Only people who have not realized their value yet. And maybe today, that changes for you. Maybe today you stop measuring your life by comparison or recognition or visibility, and you start measuring it by faithfulness, obedience, and purpose. Because that's what God sees. And that is what truly matters the most.